Being a casual fan of fighting games makes me feel like I'm trapped between two worlds. On the one hand is my love for the games themselves, while on the other hand is my dislike of playing online. Since me and my friends all have jobs, kids, and other responsibilities now, it's difficult to sync up our schedule to play a match or two, so all I'm left with is the single player most of the time. Thankfully, due to digital distribution, it's easier than ever to get my hands on a variety of great games from old school to modern. So here is a list of the 12 fighting games I've played the most. I don't necessarily think these are the best I own, just the ones I played the most up to this point.
Street Fighter V.
What started off as bare bones is now jam-packed with modes and content. The Championship Edition has a roster of 40 characters and 5 more available as DLC or unlockable with fight money. The survival mode is by far one of the most engaging I have ever played, with its battle supplements and consumables making it a far more involved experience. While the game initially lacked an arcade mode, it now contains 6. Each with a different boss, different endings, and a different selection of characters from the main roster. While the endings are just comic book panels, the art is well done and it's nice to see recreations of the old endings done in this format. Given all that, it's no wonder that I ended up clocking in over 36 hours.
Samurai Showdown.
SNK have a strong understanding of what makes a good arcade mode, and the one in Samurai Showdown 2019 features everything you would need: random enemy order that includes DLC characters, stage intros, mid-run cutscenes, a memorable final boss, and character-specific endings. While the final boss does suffer a bit from SNK boss syndrome, the fact that the combat is focused more on timing rather than combos makes it a bit more unique. Other solo activities include the classic time trial and survival modes, along with something called the Gauntlet that pits you against the entire roster. Even though the modes are very basic, it still managed to catch my attention for a solid 48 hours. Though to be fair, the long load times could have also inflated the playtime a little bit. Dragon Ball FighterZ. No one does cel-shaded graphics like Arc System works. I've heard some people refer to this game as Guilty Gear with Dragon Ball characters, but that's not even remotely true. The game plays nothing like Guilty Gear. Dragon Ball FighterZ gameplay is much faster and more agile, focusing more on flying and teleporting all over the place. As far as game modes, you have a story that basically plays like the original Dissidia with a board and turn limit, a bunch of cutscenes, and evil versions of the protagonists. It functions fairly well, but I didn't find it very engaging. Even to this day, I haven't played past the first story arc. Instead, I spent most of my 49 hours playing the arcade mode. You have free fixed courses, 2 difficulty options, and free randomized courses. There are no endings or bosses, and had it not been for the Dragon Ball Z license, I probably wouldn't have played it as much as I did. The base roster is fairly good, with 21 characters at the beginning and 3 more unlockable by playing. You can also purchase an additional 20 characters as DLC, making the final count quite high. However, be warned, many characters play very similarly, with the exception of a couple super moves. As far as Dragon Ball games go, it's one of the best I played since Budokai Tenkaichi 3, but as far as fighting games as a whole go, I think you can do better. Fun fact, Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was called Dragon Ball Z Sparking Meteor in Japan. The King of Fighters collection, the Orochi Saga. What appears to be straight up PS2 emulation of Neo Geo emulations, complete with boot logos and memory card warnings, the Orochi Saga contains the entire first story arc of the King of Fighters franchise, consisting of 4 mainline story games and the first Dream Match game. The majority of the 47 hours were spent in the first 4 games, as I also own 98UM, and I prefer playing that version over the one included with this collection. While I did most of the endings for 96 and 97, including some of the secret endings, I was only able to beat 94 and 95 once. So if you are looking for a challenge, I definitely recommend you check these out, Team Korea and the bosses being especially difficult. The non-pack free versus free combat and the focus on teams rather than individuals for the story make this a rather unique franchise. The story, while silly, is enjoyable, the music is catchy, and the gameplay is stimulating. It's no wonder this franchise has survived almost 3 decades and is still going strong. If you have never played this series and don't want to pay full price for KOF 15, which by the way is an amazing game, then the Orochi collection is definitely worth picking up.
Soul Calibur 6.
According to various sources, the only reason Soul Calibur 6 was made was because the developers begged the people upstairs to let them make it. When you have that kind of passion, you should at least make a good game. Thankfully, they did. The story mode, while clearly low budget, has some decent scenarios that properly explain the lore of each character and the world as a whole. It's presented in a timeline format which makes it very easy to follow. Having only played Soul Calibur 3 about 10 years ago, I knew very little about the story of the series going in, so I'm happy they put in the effort. Next we have Libra of Souls, probably where I spend most of my hours. It's a full-on RPG complete with character creation, stats, choices, side quests, a map to explore, and even random encounters. To my surprise, this isn't just some throwaway mode. Instead, the story seems to be canon, as the player character known as the Conduit actually shows up in the story mode. And some chapters of said story are only unlocked after certain quests are completed in Libra. Also, the mode can be surprisingly difficult sometimes, with several side quests having me cursing at the TV. Finally, there is the game's arcade mode, which sadly is very poorly made. There is no final boss, no character endings, and even the random nature of the mode seems to be broken, as I've encountered several characters during the exact same stage on multiple runs. The final opponent seems to always be Huang, and I recall back at launch it was Geralt. These characters aren't bad, but they aren't bosses either. If you aren't going to make the last opponent a boss or a story rival, you might as well make the slot random. Surprisingly, the game actually does have a final boss, Chaos, but he's only seen in the story mode and then unlocked for versus mode. It seems like such a missed opportunity. I can't comprehend why they made the arcade mode this way when all of the elements to make it better were already in the game, but I digress. There's still plenty to keep you busy in the game, from the story to Libra to making your own amazing characters. Overall, I hope we see a Soul Calibur 7, because while recording the footage for this video, I ended up playing it for another 10 hours over the weekend. Mortal Kombat 10. Mortal Kombat was a series I used to obsess over. I bought a copy of Armageddon before even owning a PlayStation 2, spent hours looking up guides and trying to unlock everything in Deception and Deadly Alliance's Conquest mode, spent tons of money to play Mortal Kombat 4 at an internet cafe, and accidentally smashed a wall socket while real-life role-playing MK1 fights with my brother. Ah, good times. Believe it or not, I actually didn't buy Mortal Kombat 10 when it launched. In fact, it was my then girlfriend that bought it, and I ended up playing it more than her. And just when I was starting to get bored with the base game, out comes Excel, which I immediately bought. The game had everything I loved about the series. They had the arcade towers, the test your might minigames, fatalities, stage fatalities eventually. The cinematic story mode from vs DC and Mortal Kombat 9 was back. Stage interactions straight out of Injustice made their appearance, along with the brand new brutalities that, while named after a type of finisher from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, were really its own original thing. The crypt was also enhanced to feature more interactivity, and the brand new living towers gave me hours of enjoyment. I distinctly remember waking up early one morning, having a quick shower, eating some breakfast, and doing the latest premium tower before running off to work. It brought back a certain kind of passion that I thought I had lost. So while many of my friends hated the Teen Titans-esque story and the new characters, to me, the wait to have a proper playable Shinnok had finally ended, and Mortal Kombat 10 takes its place in the number 5 spot. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 4. The Ultimate Ninja series is one of those rare cases of a licensed property where I was more interested in the games rather than the source materials. A large chunk of the story mode is presented as anime stills that in a few instances make the action hard to follow, but in most cases are used very well. Considering how dialogue heavy the story is, it would have been easy to just throw in two character models, but instead we have artwork reflecting the emotions the characters are going through. Regardless of the actual reason they decided to do it this way, it feels more like an artistic choice rather than a way to cut corners. The boss fights and special battles are very fun and add some variety to the campaign, but none of them are particularly hard. Speaking of which, the way the game handles difficulty is actually very interesting. The campaign itself is fairly easy already, but on top of that the game has a kind of King of Fighters style continue option that makes the battle even easier in case you do lose. So even the worst players can get through the campaign without much hassle. At first I thought this was a shame, as the devs clearly put a lot of effort into making the bosses interesting, with unique patterns and vulnerability windows, but there's no real incentive to learn them. That is, until I tried getting an S rank in every level. This is where I would wager I spent most of my 63 hours of playtime. I kept replaying the same section over and over until I was able to trigger all of the secret actions, do all of the quick time events perfectly, and avoid getting hit all at the same time. Moving on from the story, the adventure mode is basically like an open world RPG comprised of side quests. I found all of it to be very forgettable overall, and I'm glad it's side content and not part of the main campaign. Then we have the survival and league modes, which are essentially fixed enemy gauntlets with special victory conditions, and an ultimate survival mode where you try to survive as many enemies as possible. Sadly, there is no arcade mode, but, and I honestly can't believe I'm saying this, the abundance of single-player content and the massive roster make up for this. The combat is loads of fun with flashy animations, single ultimate attacks, team ultimate attacks, transformations, combo finishers. There is just so much to see with each individual character. Surprisingly, there is no split screen. Instead, the camera switches between players at key points during the fight. At first I was worried this would make the action hard to follow, but after a few minutes of playing I didn't even notice it anymore. It's a brilliant concept that I'm surprised we don't see in more 3D fighters. Even after all this time I still have fun playing it and hope to see something else of this level of quality coming from the dev team in the future. Blaze Blue Central Fiction. Technically Blaze Blue 4, Central Fiction is the final chapter of Ragnar's story and they went all out. Massive roster, 3 arcade modes, each with their own story and ending sequences, a massive visual novel story mode with a few anime cutscenes peppered in here and there, a score attack mode, a time attack mode, and a light RPG mode. Characters often play very differently from each other, each with a variety of special moves, ultimate attacks, and even finishing attacks. And as a fan of alternate timelines and parallel universes, I found the story to be especially engaging. Thankfully, they also included an encyclopedia feature that helps the player understand what's going on and how the universe works. Overall, a very fun game wrapped in a very solid package. I put this game at number 3 in my top 10 favorite PS4 fighting games, and with 91 hours of game time, it takes the same spot here. Injustice 2. While several popular video games seem to struggle with being able to create basic single-player modes, Injustice 2's multiverse managed to go above and beyond anything I had seen in a fighting game up to that point. It's essentially a super arcade mode. You have to defeat a series of random opponents while fulfilling certain conditions, from using a certain number of special moves to playing with a specific character. Each universe has a specific theme and is only available for a certain time. The towers are split into different stages, which would often make me transition from just doing one stage to just completing the main objective to I might as well complete the remaining stages before this thing expires. The bosses of this mode are beefed up versions of regular playable characters. Think Extreme Nako Ryuki from Guilty Gear Strive. As if all of this wasn't enough, we also have the legendary multiverse. Fixed, extremely difficult character-specific universes that require unlocking by fulfilling certain conditions while you are playing the regular multiverse, such as defeating a certain number of heroes or villains with the characters depending on the case, or finishing the fight with a super attack, that kind of thing. It basically adds more stuff to keep track of while playing the game and motivates you to incorporate certain moves and combos into your playstyle. While certain fighting games use their cinematic story as the main focus of the single-player experience, Injustice 2 just has it as the icing on the cake. It's good, but nothing special. If you thought the multiverse mode would be a replacement for the traditional arcade mode, you would be wrong. The game still has the classic towers of different sizes, ending in the game's main boss and an ending cutscene. There is also a survival mode and an endless tower, which I primarily use to level up my characters. Finally, the game's gear system, one of its most marketed features, shines, with various items, skins, and legendary sets changing the look of the character while also affecting your attacks and by extension your playstyle. Overall, the experimental hybrid of fighting game and looter RPG struck a sweet spot that I didn't even know I wanted. I spent many nights playing this game until the early hours of the morning and will probably spend many more. Mortal Kombat 11. This is not only my most played PS4 fighting game, but rather my most played PS4 game in general. And keep in mind, I have the Platinum trophy in each of the 3 Dark Souls games. I haven't played Witcher as much as I've played Mortal Kombat 11. And what mode did I spend the bulk of my over 400 hours in? Why, the Towers of Time, of course. The game has its story mode, its traditional arcade mode, its survival, its online, you name it. But the Towers of Time is by far the most addictive mode I've ever played in any fighting game ever. On top of having to deal with special effects such as weather hazards, attacks coming from off-screen, or being forced to play a specific character, or even a tag team, you also have consumables that give you the ability to have Melina's Psy attack from off-screen, heal mid-battle, summon armor, and many more. Constantly unlocking gear pieces, new skins, and the really cool intros and outros that made not using fatalities look just as cool kept me going, alright, just one more tower and then I call it a night. New mechanics include the Fatal Blow, which functions similarly to the Desperation moves in certain SNK games, and Crushing Blows, which are special extra animations added to pre-existing moves under certain conditions that deal extra damage. The customization options are also insane. I probably spent almost as much time here as I did in the Towers of Time, mixing up various gear pieces with different skins in order to make unique designs for my characters, and of course tweaking my move list by using ability slots. Since I bought the game at launch and each season pass as soon as it became available, I must have spent more money on this one game than any other, and frankly, it was worth the price. NetherRealm Studios seems to be the only company that still innovates when it comes to single-player content and fighting games, and I hope they keep up this trend in their future titles.